ways. I'm going to do this way second. So I have my slab, and I compressed it up. And I like to work with the slab just even a little bit thinner, so I might stretch them. And so you can do that on one of these boards. The other things that I have that I'll need is a pin tool, a fork. I like to have a paddle, a ruler. And so just so that you can see, I can take, my paper is going to be really wet, and I wanted to keep these wet, but I can use my board. So you can do this right at your table, and that's good. Okay, so now I'm thinking about, well, let's start making texture. These orbs, I've made so many of them, and recently I saw somebody selling them as an orb texturizer, and it's just by taking it and rolling it all over the place. I can get so many different textures taking place. Again, thinking about my roulettes, my textures, and then even one of my favorites has always been like the corn. And so it doesn't have to have so many, that's for sure. I mean, you can contrast one or the other. And then maybe I'll think about taking like this wonderful geometric against something organic, and I'll go through one of my favorites, and it's just, this one doesn't work nearly as well, and I have to remake it. I called it chicken skin. And so when I roll it, it just gets this wonderful little dimple to it. So you'll see it. So let's make a form. So the first thing I'm going to think about is, do I want my form to be flared out? Do I want it to go straight up? Do I want it to angle in and come out? So the first thing I'm going to think about is, I know the bottom, I want it to be flat, so I'm going to get rid of this. But this could be an amazing edge on something, because it's what we would call a live edge, right? You've heard that in woodworking. So if I put a little slab on the bottom of this, this could be my own little salt container. You know, it's like, oh, put little feet on it. That'd be so precious. I'm gonna stretch it one more time. It won't hurt my texture. Okay. And I'm not gonna measure. I'm gonna use what I have. And so, I always save these little bits. Wipe that down, that's a nice little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and roll one more time. I want a really nice and juicy texture there. And so you can decide to overlap or to hide it. You all remember about beveling. So to do it quicker, I know that I'm going to do it right on top. And I'm going to go ahead and score it up. And I'm going to overlap it. And I'm going to use my ruler and my paddle. I'm going to paddle it together. And then I love belly buttons, so I'm going to do belly buttons. So this is something, just to remind everybody, you have done something like this with me already, so you get that. But let's say you wanted to start, I'm just going to set that there. Let's say you want to start with something that has a little bit more of an angle to it. You want it to be like this. Well, that comes from a circle or a cone, okay? And so if you have a cone, well, let me shut this off, I'm sorry. just made that form. So that's what I have. And that's what essentially my cup and my bowl templates are all about. So if I took this and turned it here, now I have a cone shape. It could be a bowl, but it's going to be a cone shape. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to set it here. I'm going to texture more. I also have this one already pre-cut out, but you can make your own in one size larger, I think. And I'll set them out so you can use them. Maybe not. I might not have a large bowl anymore. Okay. That'll be fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this out. But I'm also going to show you how, oh, let me give it more texture. Let's give it corn. How I could take this shape, I'm going to stretch it again. I love them when they're a little thinner. And what I'm going to do first is just like this, I'm going to cut a circle. And I'm going to cut a circle in the middle, and then I'm going to cut down the side. So I could overlap it. So let's see what happens with this one. Oh, all this is good clay, so, and that's my chicken skin, so I don't want it to dry out. So I'm going to stretch it again, even though I just cut it out. You don't have to, but I like it when it's a little more stretched out. And so here, this is going to be the bottom of my piece. So a lot of this for me is about making shapes, making forms, and then assembling them together. Okay. So I have my next slab. And so here's a cylinder. I don't have to have the whole thing. I can just cut out a nice cylinder shape. I'm going to set it up top. So let me get a piece of this. So I'm going to stretch it one more time. And before I usually start assembling them, I'll make sure that I anchor it with a bottom. So again, you remember this part. So I'm going to score it up. Put it down. Trace it out. And depending on how I want to finish it, sometimes I will turn my edges up so that becomes part of the texture. And then sometimes, of course, I finish them really neat. On the bottom of this one, I also had the texture to it. So that's kind of fun. So always remember to score this up. And I just know that I like to get the bottom on, especially if I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. Sometimes, like really large ones, like what we saw in our examples, sometimes it's really a good idea to even start with the bottom, just so that you build upward. So I'm just going to tap this around. Now the nice thing about working like this is that once it starts to set up, I can go back in and just kind of refine it a little bit. But this lets me get something going. And I think you can tell it lets me get a couple multiple things going. So I would take my sponge and clean up all my edges afterwards. So if you look at this one, you can see that I've cleaned up my edges. just gonna put this together. This is a great way to make lids, in fact, from that circle. So I'm gonna get this here. And then I'm just gonna let it set for a second. And then I'm gonna score it up inside. So it's things that you guys know about. And just score it up. I want you to take your time a little bit more than I am, but I don't want to take too much more of this time. And so I'm just gently pinching it around, making sure it has connection. And then, where's my chicken skin? It's over here. Is that funny? When you come up to see it, you'll say, oh my gosh, Lynn, it does. It looks like it. It's getting dry, so I might have to roll it again. Roll it one more time. And so sometimes what I have to do is flare things out a little bit. Now, the next one, let's see, I'm gonna put it on an angle. And just pinch it. And then you can take your texture and put it back on top so it hides. But I'm gonna flare this edge a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and texture. Okay. Score this up. And then use water. I don't like using slip in this process. You could. And then find that spot. Now, maybe you don't like to see that seam. And that's fine, I get that. So what about if I then made it a belt? So I can take my clay, cut it here. I need to get a little more moisture back into it. And I'll make it a belt. And so I'm going to score this all up. And so I'm going to piece it together. So now it has a little bit more of that layered look to it. So maybe I want it to go up. Well, I think I want this one to be a bottom, but let's see what happens if I went up now. Oh, that's super exciting. So I'm gonna let you sit over here for a moment. Okay. So I might think about adding a bottom to this, but I also might think about keep bringing it in. So this could happen in a circle, in a cylinder, or in a form like this. Okay, a cone. So what I'm going to do is just score this whole ridge up on the inside. And I'm going to go ahead and give it some water. And then I'm going to pinch in so it looks like a clover leaf. So this is getting it 3 feet. And what's going to happen is that you'll have this little opening, whether it's 3 or 4. Okay. And then after I get it completely compressed on the inside, I'll put a fun little patch on it. So if you look at this one that has the 3, you'll see that I bring it in, and then I take my little circle, and I cut that out before, and I bring it in, I blend it, and then I'm going to go ahead and score all this up. And give it some water and overlap it. So this is a really tiny version of one of these. And then you blend the inside. And then once you get it all together, you can even shape the feet a little bit. And it works really nicely with a really big cylinder and pinching those in, okay? So now, let me go back to this guy, because I know I don't have time to build everything, but to show you things. So now I want to continue the height on this one. So I'm going to get myself another layer. I still have this piece of clay sitting here. I like that piece of clay. I always try not to have too much scrap. I kind of like stuff like this too. And you can see that sometimes what I'll do is that I see in here, it's like I like this texture. And so I'll see this area here and I'll think, oh, that might be really interesting if I take out a section of it. And I'm going to pinch it out. And then I'm going to put a little gusset in there, like a little patch. So I'm going to score that up. And again, giving it water. And I'm going to pinch that in. So now I have another texture in there. And now, thinking about, like, what can I do next? I'm going to go ahead and add another layer and continue this one. So I start getting a lot more variety and playing around. And maybe you want to keep it simple. Maybe you want to keep it so that you only have maybe 2 textures or 3 textures. I get that. Like this one now is on the outside. We'll continue it. But so if I keep putting it on the outside, it's going to grow out that way. But now, if I decide, let's do this one, I want it to go on the inside, it's going to come back in. So I wanted to share that with you. It's like, how can I have the form going in different directions? So depending upon where I put that, so now I'm going to place this one inside. Does that make sense? So now it's going to get narrower. So then I can go back to my circle again. You know, and if you're not good at cutting circles out, there's so many things to trace. And I guess I'm not concerned that my circle is exactly a circle. Let's give it, oh, what haven't I used? Let's give it this texture. This one always looks like stones. Oh, and I think I want the texture on the inside and outside. That'd be cool. So then I'm going to add my rim here. And the poor little thing, he's leaning a little bit. So now I'm going to think about, oh, my handle. So that was that little piece of scrap that I had. So I want to give it some water. Put it in here. And guess what? I know that this is not a functional handle. It's going to help hold itself up because, oh, it's ready for spring break. And then, who said everything has to be matchy-matchy, even? There's nothing. So now, I put something together. I know I have ends that I need to go back and fine tune, but I do that after it sets a little while. I'm pretty sure it's a self-portrait. I think that what you're going to discover is how you can start broadening your form a little bit. I didn't have time to throw a new one, and I so wanted to. And this one is a little bit on the dry side. But here I have, you know, that formal pot, and everybody is always worried about, oh, I can't do anything here, you know, or they think everything is going to happen with the glaze. But just by going in when it's leather hard, and not a really stiff leather hard, this one is almost too much, you could go in with, say, I think I pulled a couple of them out. Oh, they're behind me. A paddle. These are ceramic paddles. And you can texturize something. And right away, it changes what's going to happen on this form. It changes the form a little bit. It's still thrown evenly, but it starts to open up then possibilities. I could come in, and after I let it get leather hard, I could come in, and I can think about, well, oops, I pushed that too far. Oh, that would be okay. Let's see. Fill that back in. I can start thinking about then how I can be playing around with my surfaces, because every time I do something else to my clay, I'm creating another avenue for that glaze. I'm creating another avenue of self-expression, and I'm leading it into my direction. But I'm going to be honest with you and say this. Once you learn how to throw this form, so what, okay? What are you going to do with it next? That's what they understand. That's what I'm telling you. But I know it takes us a while to get to that form. But I'm going to say, so what? The what is, what are you going to do next to it? How are you going to expand it? What are you going to add to it? What are you going to subtract to it? A direct way might be through texture. It might be through something that you add to it. It might be something that you subtract to it.